Hello everyone, Spider-Man No Way Home has arrived in cinemas finally. I saw it. It is an amazing film, a spectacular film, and it might quite possibly be the ultimate Spider-Man film. I know for myself and others out there, your rankings are about to change. Mine has greatly changed since the last ranking I did. It's up on YouTube if you want to check it out. It's a mask edition. I could not find my Spider-Man mask, so we're going to go maskless, much like Peter Parker having his identity revealed. Again, this will contain spoilers, so if you have not seen Far From Home, No Way Home, any of the Spider-Man films, do not watch this. I will also exclude spin-offs such as Venom and Morbius. Here we go. To start off with my least favorite at number 9 will be Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man 3 is the first example of studio interference and Sony really getting their hands on the franchise and trying to cram as much stuff into one film as possible. They really did Venom dirty in this. I don't like the Venom, emo Parker stuff. You have Sandman, you have the new Goblin, but it is a misunderstood film and it has themes of forgiveness that are quite different from any other comic book film. You can tell there's a deeper drama. It has its moments, despite being like my least favorite, despite not being as good as the first two films. It is an underrated flick in some regards. The best part of it is Thomas Hayden Church as Flint Marko, aka Sandman. His transformation is so tragic, but also he's trying to do the right thing for his daughter, but sometimes the way he goes about it is wrong. The only thing I quite didn't like was him being Uncle Ben's real killer. I understand what they're doing in this film, but I feel like it just negates the whole purpose and undermines the first film of Peter Parker letting the thief go and that guy killing Uncle Ben, you know? Indirectly, yes, he's kind of responsible, but that just defeated his whole origin. It does get a little bit like a soap opera with Harry Osborn and Mary Jane. I get mad at Mary Jane because I'm like, I know Harry Osborn's threatening Peter Parker, but do you remember that your boyfriend is Spider-Man? Like, he could handle him. Overall, though, it has some cool moments with the new Goblin. I wish he had more of a Hobgoblin look, but it's cool that they gave him, like, an extreme sports snowboard. I really like what James Franco does, going back to the old Harry Osborn, getting amnesia, and then coming back and basically wanting to enact revenge on Peter Parker. There's a lot of good stuff, especially with their fight. That is a highlight of the film. You're going to cry, Goblin Jr.? With the way they did Venom, I love the black suit. There's a lot of homages to the comics. Too bad we didn't get that original suit. It's kind of unsettling to see Peter Parker so arrogant. The people love him. He has the key to the city. But sometimes when you're not facing great enemies, your greatest enemy is in fact yourself, the enemy within. And that's what this shows. There are moments where I wish Mary Jane was trying to understand that Peter Parker was trying to help her with his advice, but then there's moments where like Peter Parker's not listening to Mary Jane. It's like, dude, you're so full of yourself, you're not knowing what she's going through right now. And it's kind of a troubling thing to see, especially after the ending of Spider-Man 2. But the ending of that kind of foreshadows this film. It does have some silly dance moments. This was an ambitious film, and it just had too many cooks in the kitchen. There's some parts that feel very much Sam Raimi, but this was one of the first disappointing experiences I had in the cinema, and I don't like it as much as the other Spider-Man films, but I do like it better with age. And after seeing No Way Home, I'm glad that this isn't the last time we see Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. And I would have loved to see what Sam Raimi would have done with Spider-Man 4. After that, at number 8 is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This is another film that has studio interference from Sony. They just put so much into this movie. Like before No Way Home came out, pretty much the best Spider-Man films were the films that only had one antagonist. Dane DeHaan, I think, is a little bit underrated as Harry Osborn. I don't like him. I think he's miscast. He does kind of turn like a goblin, but not like the comics. Paul Giamatti's very cartoonish as Rhino. However, I do love Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx could have held this movie on his own. I love the character of Max, even if it is a bit Edward Nygma-ish. I love him as Electro. Pharrell Williams and Hans Zimmer's score is great. It's On Again by Alicia Keys, and Kendrick Lamar is just an awesome track. This movie is both the best and worst Spider-Man films in one film. It's a paradox. I do love the backstory of Peter Parker's parents. That airplane sequence and that opening with Andrew Garfield swinging was just awesome. And we get to see Spider-Man as Spider-Man. I don't know why they had him in high school in the first film if he was only graduate in this one. They really speed things along and make it like Tobey Maguire's outfit. I'm like, you could have just brought Tobey Maguire back or just continue the films if his outfit was going to look similar but with the Ultimate Spider-Man eyes. Again, the action set pieces are amazing, no pun intended. Sally Field as Aunt May is terrific, and I do feel for Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy at the end. Emma Stone, it's just heartbreaking seeing what Peter Parker has to go through. But then ultimately, he ends up realizing the hero he is and gets over it and moves forward in life to become the hero we all know, to become that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. This film, despite having its weaker moments, a lot of Easter eggs and shoehorns for Sinister Six, I think is an underrated film in some regards, and has some of the best Spidey action I've seen. After that, at number 7 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man Homecoming is a film that I really enjoyed on my first viewing, but with repeated viewings, I didn't like it as much. For one, he's more like Iron Boy. You know, I didn't see that Spider-Man we saw in Captain America Civil War, but I do love the John Hughes aspect of it. I really do. I love that he's a kid. I love how it feels almost like the comics, especially with the web gliders and stuff under his arms. Ned, again, is his friend, so it's a bit more like Miles Morales and Peter Parker merger, really. Michael Keaton is excellent as the Vulture. Good old Spider-Man, you know, that's such a cool scene and reveal. And you do have Iron Man. I wish we got to see him team up more, but this really is a good lesson about, like, it's not the suit that makes the man, it's the man underneath the mask, the man that makes the suit. And Peter Parker has to go through a strong lesson there. There's a lot of comic book nods. Kind of cool seeing Spidey in the MCU, even though he's not like Peter Parker Spider-Man that we all know from the comics. In some ways, yes, as far as the awkward teenager. In other ways, I'm like, he's a brilliant scientist. He doesn't need Iron Man tech to be Spider-Man. Like, he can make his own suit. He can do all this stuff. He feels like a sidekick. He feels like Iron Boy. Spider-Man is no one's sidekick. After that, at number 6 is The Amazing Spider-Man. This film's only weakness for me is the fact that they had to retell the origin so soon. I mean, they rebooted it in like 10 years, but not even that. It was like 2007 and 2012. However, I do think Andrew Garfield is a highly underrated Spider-Man Peter Parker. It reminds me of the Ultimate Spider-Man run in the early 2000s. It really does. And I think kind of like Affleck as Batman, because it was so soon, a reboot so soon after the previous incarnation, people didn't accept it. Even if those incarnations are probably one of the most comic book accurate portrayals, you know? I love him and Emma Stone. We have Gwen Stacy finally in the films properly, her being his first girlfriend. You have Rhys Ifans as the Lizard. Dr. Connors in this is such a heartbreaking tale. The best Spider-Man villains are always villains, and really the best Marvel villains that are sympathetic. They don't want to go out and be villains. Just life does this to them, and it's just tragic. I love the way they explain Peter Parker's blood and his father working on the spider DNA. Uncle Ben and Aunt May, you know, you have Martin Sheen and Sally Field. I thought they were excellent as Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Overall, this is a really stylized film, very grounded, dark, and gritty, and Andrew Garfield has that Spidey humor. I just love that part. He's like, oh no, you found my weakness, it's small knives, you know? That part was hilarious. It's a different retelling. If there's anything I had against Garfield as Peter Parker, it's not him, it's just that he seems too cool to be picked on in high school. I'm like, that Peter Parker's cool. Like, yeah, he's a bit awkward, but he's not as nerdy or as much of a geek as the others, where I could kind of see Tom Holland and Tobey Maguire being picked on, but Andrew Garfield just seems too cool. I love how caring he is trying to help Dr. Connors. He's not arrogant like in Spider-Man 3. He actually is a scientist. He makes his own web cartridges and stuff. I really like this portrayal of Peter Parker, and it's such a shame that we didn't have an Amazing Spider-Man follow-up that was as good as this film. Amazing Spider-Man 2 could have totally gone the Dark Knight route and actually had Norman Osborn's Green Goblin and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man meet face-to-face in the whole Gwen Stacy death. Despite being a reboot too soon, I think it's an underrated film, and I like it for what it is. And who could also forget Dennis Leary as Captain Stacy? I mean, talk about comic book accuracy. After that, at number 5 is Spider-Man Far From Home. This is a sequel that I think is much superior to Homecoming. A lot of people hate on this film now. I don't know why. Yes, it's in the MCU. I don't like that Nick Fury turned out to be a Skrull, but you know what's really cool in this? Finally seeing Mysterio on film, and Jake Gyllenhaal knocks it out of the park as Mysterio. I absolutely love him as Mysterio and all the twists. Peter Parker's still going through growing pains, but it's almost like a European vacation kind of teenage film. He just wants to be a kid. He doesn't want to be Spider-Man. Infinity War Endgame happened. He's trying to get his life back on track. He misses Tony Stark. Tony Stark is dead. And he's trying to ask MJ out. Zendaya's MJ. And you know, he has different suits. He has the Iron suit. He has the Stealth suit. And Tom Holland, I feel, really comes into his own in this film. He's still kind of Iron Boy, but he really holds his own in the third act. And there's some parts that remind me of the comics with Mysterio. It's just awesome to see in a film. And that ending, who could forget that ending? It was the stepping stone that went into No Way Home and just kind of changed everything. We were just going, what the, you know? After that, at number 4 for me is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now, I actually think this might be the best made Spider-Man film. There's some films that I like more than this one, but this is just an awesome animated film. It's no wonder it won Best Picture for an animated film. I love Miles Morales. I love seeing Spider-Gwen, seeing all these different universes collide. Heck, if it wasn't for this film, we may never have had No Way Home. And it kind of reminded me of the comics and cartoons with Madam Web and like Shattered Dimensions and stuff. Kingpin, this other Peter Parker being killed at the beginning, that was just brutal. Chris Pine. Seeing these people work together, seeing Peter B. Parker's storyline was just depressing and almost felt like Tobey Maguire if he was older. Overall, this is like a Spider-Man comic come to life. The animation, the twists and turns. This is made for the fans, and I think every Spider-Man fan will get a kick out of this. It really honors the whole legacy of the character throughout numerous decades, and it's just an entertaining ride with a lot of humor and heart from start to finish. After that, at number 3 for me is Spider-Man from 2002. I actually have a bit of a soft spot for Spider-Man. There's a lot of nostalgia. Ever since seeing the teaser trailer with the World Trade Centers on Final Fantasy Spirits Within, I wanted to see this movie. My brother and I were blown away. It's like, what, Spider-Man's going to be on film for the first time? I grew up with a 90s show. This film, while it feels a bit dated, the editing's a bit odd. It's not as faithful to the comics as far as like Gwen Stacy and stuff like that. I think it is faithful to the essence of Spider-Man, and Sam Raimi's films very much feel like that 60s era of Spider-Man. Like, this is Spider-Man. Yeah, Green Goblin looks like he's in a Power Rangers film. He's not an actual goblin, but William Dafoe just kills it. I love this kind of grounded approach. Tobey Maguire makes this movie as Peter Parker. Yeah, he may not look like Peter Parker from the comics, but with the voice and his performance, he is Peter Parker Spider-Man, you know? You have Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane Watson, James Franco as Harry Osborn. I love Rosemary Harris and Cliff Robertson as Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben's death is tragic. The whole origin is just like the comics, but then they speed things along and go to college. I love how fast this moves. In many ways, it has 3 different stages, much like Superman the movie. J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson is perfect casting. The action with the bridge, again, Spider-Man come out to play. There's so many iconic lines here. Just everything about this movie is just epic, and this still has one of the best endings to any Spider-Man film I've ever seen. Danny Elfman's score is iconic. And what can I say? This was the start of many great things for Spider-Man in cinema. After that, at number 2 is Spider-Man No Way Home. I might make a lot of people mad here, but this is an awesome movie. I love seeing Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire back. The way they did that was just incredible. Seeing these villains back, adding a bit more depth. I wanted more character development and maybe more time with the villains after the second half, but Willem Dafoe absolutely kills it in this. And it really brought another side to Tom Holland as the character. This is the film where he goes from Iron Boy and literally becomes the Spider-Man that we know from the comics. He is Spider-Man now, and I cannot wait to see what happens in the future with him. The fight between him and Green Goblin in the apartment was just insane. Jamie Foxx back as Electro. Alpha Molina as Doc Ock. You also had Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman. Rhys Ifans as the Lizard. And you have Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange. Matt Murdock. Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock, Daredevil. There's so many cool moments in this film. And it's a celebration of Spider-Man in cinema. It really is. It's not a perfect film, though. I still feel like they could have done a little bit more. I feel like the editing was a bit off in certain places. The first half is really the weakest part. Once Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield come in, I think it's an excellent film, and I wonder if I would have liked it as much if they were not in it, you know? It would have been enough with the villains, but like that wasn't enough. It was really Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield being back that made this, in conjunction with Tom Holland going through the character arc he went through. And it makes me think of a quote of like, your hero is only as good as your villain. And seeing good actors who are not miscast play these iconic villains in a different way was cool enough in itself, but also it brought out something that we'd never seen before in Tom Holland. It tested him. He's been through a lot of stuff with the Avengers, losing Tony Stark, but here he really suffered, and also he made some dumb decisions throughout the whole movie. He had to go through some growing pains, to say the least. Forget he's a kid. Seeing J.K. Simmons much like a green screen like this one in his room was funny at the beginning. But overall, that whole sacrifice was just emotional at the end. And Peter Parker having to put everyone else ahead of his own needs, you know? And it also makes me wonder about Ned. I know he's like former Miles Morales, but will we get to see him as a hobgoblin now that he doesn't know Peter Parker's Spider-Man? I wonder what that's going to set up in the future. I love the banter and chemistry all the Spider-Men have with each other, you know, my back! And Andrew Garfield popped Tobey Maguire's back. You know, the web fluid situation, Tobey Maguire's like, you can't do that, can you? This movie was just a giant love letter, and it was one for the fans. Brutal action, humor, heart. The way it ended reminded me a lot of Spider-Man, the video game with his apartment. I wish we got to see Mr. Digovich there. Rent, that would have been funny if he popped up, but his suit at the end was like the comic book suit come to life. I love the ending to this movie, and I cannot wait to see where Spider-Man goes in cinema. This is a good place for Spider-Man to be in cinema, and it's such a great time to be a Spider-Man fan. After that, at number 1 is Spider-Man 2. I still have a soft spot for this film, but this film has everything. Peter Parker is just knocked down by life. There are moments in this film that are straight from the comic books. Peter Parker is really facing the repercussions of the decisions he made as Spider-Man 1. Alfred Molina's Doc Ock is a sympathetic villain who loses everything and then ends up being taken control by his own experiment. And Spider-Man really dealing with duality. Can I get what I want? Can I get what I need? Or do I have to give up even my dreams in order to do what's right? Here he really learns with great power comes great responsibility. And this not only feels like the most true Spider-Man film, but it's a great Peter Parker film and just a great film, period. You know, this is one of the early comic book movies that just broke the ground in the genre and felt like just a good film that brought us a grounded take on a character that also stayed highly true to the comics. And after all these years, it's still my favorite Spider-Man film. Is it the best made one? I'll let you decide that, but to me, it's my favorite. I have a soft spot for it, and it really hasn't gotten as good as this until Into the Spider-Verse and No Way Home. This film is just a roller coaster from start to finish, and it has so many Easter eggs that I wish were paid off better, but it's such a rewarding experience after everything you went through in the first film to then go to this film, see the relationship with him and Mary Jane. Peter Parker kind of get a win after life knocked him down so many times, you know? And what can I say? This is a Spider-Man film that you could tell was made by a Spider-Man fan. Overall, that's my ranking. Some films are better than others, but me personally, I love all these films. I like some more than others, but I love them all. They're all great. Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire have played Peter Parker so well, and they stayed true to certain aspects of the character throughout the decades of comics. Reinventions every time, yet they all have the essence of the character and what makes the character, frankly, stay relevant after all these years. And these web of films, you can't ask for any better comic book movies out there that entertain you, that move you, and that also inspire you, you know? They say that a hero can save us. I'm not going to stand here and wait. So, on that note, let me know down in the comments below, what are your favorite Spider-Man films? How would you rank them from your least favorite to most favorite? I want to know down in the comments below. Let's have a civil discussion. I hope you enjoyed No Way Home. And yeah, feel free to let me know down in the comments below. Like for more videos and subscribe to the channel. Check out these other Spider-Man related videos for more content. Till next time, everyone. I hope everyone stays safe and healthy, and may you have a Merry Christmas.